We don't talk enough about burnout in kids. We talk
Hmm.
a lot about burnout in adults. And every adult has experienced shades of burnout, times when they wish they could undo, back up, slow down. But we don't talk about that in kids. Kids have burnout.
If you're an active mom who loves a good glass of wine but doesn't always want to be tied to a kitchen counter, let me introduce you to High Camp flasks. These aren't your average flasks. High Camp makes beautifully designed stainless steel flasks that keep your wine cold, protected, and actually tasting like wine. Whether you're headed to a picnic, a beach sunset, a hike with friends, or that well earned post practice unwind, it's wine for real life, elevated, durable, and made for moms who are always on the move but still know how to savor a moment. Check out highcampflasks.com and upgrade how you sip wherever life takes you. Welcome back to the Running Wine Mom podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Cieslinski, aka the Running Wine Mom. As a former coach and athlete, today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to. I'm joined by Ken Davidoff, longtime Major League Baseball journalist and educator, and Dr. Harley Rotbart, nationally renowned pediatrician, parenting expert, and longtime youth coach, also known as Coach Harley. Together, they've written a powerful new book, 101 Lessons from the Dugout: What Baseball and Softball Can Teach Us About the Game of Life, which speaks directly to young adults navigating pressure, comparison, failure, and identity, and to the parents and coaches trying to support them along the way. This isn't just any sports book. It's a book about character, resilience, and how the lessons learned in every moment can shape an entire life. So without further ado, let's welcome Ken and Coach Harley. Welcome.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us,
Thanks for
Sam.
having us.
Yes, I'm so excited. It is rare that I do a double interview, and so this is going to be extra special. Before we talk about baseball, softball, and books, we start each episode with our wine, and win of the week segment. This is where we share our favorite bottle of wine or drink, vent about something that's been bothering us, and celebrate our recent victories. So grab a glass, take a deep breath, and let's get started. So let's start with Ken. What is your drinking wine of the week?
Well, my wife and I love Kissler Chardonnay. That's always a go-to for us, particularly when we're celebrating something.
Awesome. How about you, Harley?
I always embarrass my wife when we're at a restaurant and they ask me if I like the wine or what wine I'd prefer. And I always say, I'm not sure blindfolded I could taste the difference between red and white. Well, I'm not really I'm not really a wine guy, but my favorite drink is a mixed drink, which I have every afternoon, and that is half Coke and half Diet Coke.
All right. Yeah, I've actually never met anyone that mixes the two of them. So that is a first
They
on the
each
podcast.
take the edge off the other. It's perfect.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep going with that, taking the edge off. What is your wine complaint of the week, Harley?
The Denver Broncos lost a game that they should have won in the AFC Championship. Hate it.
Yes, they did. And Ken, how about you?
Well, my wine of the week, do either of you use Venmo to pay people?
Yes.
Yeah, just the default public thing gets me every time. It's just so ridiculous. Like what is, and of course I look like I see my son on there a lot and he's everything seems to be kosher, but it's just this whole fascination with people paying each other. Like why is that a social media thing? And why is the default public so you have to remember to hit private?
It is so weird. And it's funny because people say that I saw that Ken Venmoed his wife $5 for coffee.
Right.
If you're married, why is that something, or whatever it is. And then I see people that they do like inappropriate, funny things when they Venmo other people publicly. And I'm like, why is it public? I don't know. Harley, what is your win of the week?
Well, I think everybody who's listening and watching this episode will remember the horrible cold snap, really torrential storms that passed through much of the country. And so my win of the week is having electricity and heat and shelter.
Yeah. How were you affected by the storm, Ken?
I live in New York City, so we got hit pretty hard. New York City always manages better than most, just the nature of being in a
Hmm.
city. But it was challenging. And now my big win of the week is today. I made it to my college gig. I'm a adjunct professor at Endicott College up in Beverly, Massachusetts, and I do a hybrid model, half in person, half Zoom. But I made it through today, and I got to meet my students in person for the first time this semester, and that's always just very energizing.
Nice,
Oh,
nice.
that's awesome. That's great. So I always like to ask my guests, what is one significant challenge you've successfully navigated shaping your journey to where you are today?
Ken?
I would say I'm a naturally shy person. When I was a child, I was painfully shy, so much so that I think my at one point my teachers were worried about me, my ability to function in society. And I've made up a lot of ground, but my nature is still to be hesitant to, confront people, approach people. So I feel like I'm always overcoming that.
Yeah. And that's why you're so good at writing because you, you don't
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
confront people. But
right,
no, I totally, that's that it's very hard with with shyness to get over that. I feel like I work on that every day. Even and especially as a professor, people automatically think probably that you are very outgoing because you can stand in front of a classroom and talk, but it's very different in so many different situations.
right, right.
How about you, Harley?
Well, as you mentioned at the outset, I am a pediatrician, but I'm the kind of pediatrician that no parent would ever want their child to need. So I took care of the sickest of the sick kids.
Mhm.
And for me, the greatest challenge was trying to get self care because the stresses of dealing with AIDS and cancer patients and severe complications of therapy were really debilitating potentially. And I had to learn ways to take care of myself so I could come home and be a husband and parent.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really hard not to bring all of that stuff back to the house. Like it's hard to separate them in that kind of field. So I'm sure. So what was your favorite way to, deal with self-care? Like how could you, if someone's listening who is in a job that is very stressful in that way, how could you guide
For me, it was meditation and exercise.
them?
And
Yeah.
really rigorous attention to both of those, and it wasn't easy to find the time for either, but I forced myself.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into this book. So, this book is coming out at a moment where young adults are overwhelmed by pressure and comparison, not just from their parents, but we have social media, we have all different outlets. When you first talked about collaborating, what felt urgent really about writing this now? Harley, what do you think?
Well, we are in an unparalleled time in kids history right now with the advent of artificial intelligence, and it was very important to me, and I know it was to Ken too, to be able to give some real intelligence, the kind where you can pick up grass from the infield and you can pick up dirt from the infield. You can pick up grass from both the infield and the outfield, but that you
Right.
can touch earth, that you can touch reality, and that you can have person to person contact, person to person human intelligence when confronted with the alternative of artificial intelligence. People are real, and baseball and softball are real, and the fields that we play on are real. And all of those, in my mind, are the antidote to artificial.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Harley. So I want to make clear, like this book is Harley's baby. He came up with this idea, and then I was fortunate enough to be invited into this idea, and I was so excited to join this venture because I have a son who's now 22 and is going to be graduating college shortly, and I saw how hard it was for him and his generation as social media surged, as AI started to become a thing, and just the social pressures just get harder and harder as far as I'm concerned. And I just think this book is a beautiful tool to help our young
Hmm.
people deal with all that pressure and adversity.
And Ken gave the idea body. I mean, he is the baseball insider to the extreme, and he legitimized everything that we wrote.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing I find so, I guess, stressful about or I guess with the teenagers today is that everything is behind a screen and they're anxious and comparing everything behind the screen, but they're not talking to the person next to them to see if that's even what they like. And I feel as though, growing up, when we kind of grew up, it was like, yeah, you had the people in your town or your grade that you could compare yourself to, but these people are being compared to people all around the world that they'll never meet, and, like, those people will never meet them, and I just think it's such a tough time for them to be growing up. So I love the idea of this. All right, so let's get to know you guys a little bit. Let's start with Ken. All right, Ken, so you've covered Major League Baseball for over 30 years. From your vantage point, what is the biggest myth young people believe about success?
Well, Samantha, I thought about this. I call it more of a misconception than a myth. And that's, I think young people underplay the role that work ethic plays in success. There's the old Thomas Edison quote, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And from seeing pro athletes up close for over 3 decades now, I think it's probably been a greater disparity in pro sports, 99.5 perspiration and zero point 0.5 inspiration. And I don't think that work ethic is appreciated enough by the young people who see these athletes just on their screens and from a crowd.
Yeah. I always love when you're like watching the Olympics, eating your Doritos, telling, that person's no good. Or, same thing with like football or baseball. Because the elites are playing against each other, they don't look as good as they actually are. But if you went out and played with them, if I went out and played with them, it would be very embarrassing. But I think a lot of people, don't connect that. So baseball is also a game of failure. How has watching elites fail, as I kind of was just talking about, and recover shaped the way you kind of think about resilience in life?
It's been the primary influence in the way I think about resilience, Samantha, because I've had the blessing, the professional blessing, and I suppose the personal blessing to see people fall on their face, both metaphorically and literally, and get grilled by the media after the
Hmm.
game and get torched in print and on TV and on social media and come back the next day to do it all over again. And you see them laughing, and joking around with their
Hmm.
teammates and just knowing the toughness it takes to put that bad day behind you and to move forward. I have viewed these athletes as role models because, when I worked in a very competitive field of sports journalism where there were also
Hmm.
wins and losses and who broke the big story and who missed the big angle. And so I took my hits as well. And the same thing, I have to come to work the next day and wear my game face and joke around with everyone else.
Yeah, it's so hard. And that's another thing. I really feel like a lot of kids these days just aren't getting or learning because the focus is sometimes in the wrong area. When a young adult picks up this book, what do you hope they understand about winning that maybe sports culture often gets wrong?
Yeah, I think in reality, there are multiple ways to win in sports. Look, there's the obvious, right? The flags fly forever. When you're a champion, you'll never have to pay for a meal in this town again. Having been, I don't know if I'm the ultimate baseball insider, as Harley so graciously calls me, but I am an insider. And I see who gets respect and who doesn't. And that does not tie in solely to results, far from it. I see who gets respect from the way they treat other people, from the way they treat the people beneath them. The clubhouse attendants,
Hmm.
the way they interact with the public. And those people, even if they don't win it all as a performer, they win because they have the respect of their peers and usually the fan base. So there are different ways to win in sports.
Hmm. Yeah, so true. And I love that, just because you're some big shot doesn't mean that you can't treat normal people like normal people. And that is one thing that I've learned from this podcast that I love is how normal big people can be, and how nice they can be, which is such a great reminder. All right, so you are up, Dr. Rotbart. You are both a pediatrician and longtime youth coach. How did being Coach Harley change the way you understood kids beyond that exam room?
Actually, I think it was bidirectional. Being being in the dugout, being on the baseball diamond helped me in the clinic. It went in that
Right.
direction too, because I was able intuitively to tell kids on the baseball field how to deal with the curveball, how to deal
Hmm.
with the bad umpire call, how to deal with the close play at home plate, how to deal with getting picked off first. I was able to do that intuitively. But in the clinic, when confronted with a child with a terrible illness or a family dealing with in crisis, I was able to translate from the curveball on the baseball field to the curveballs that life can sometimes throw you. And
Hmm.
the balancing of risk and reward. How do you pick whether you should do a potentially dangerous therapy or not? Well, coaching kids on how big a leadoff to take in balancing risk and reward helped me in the clinic, ironically, somehow, to talk to families about making risky decisions for their kids' health.
Yeah. And I do truly believe that sports can relate to anything in life, the lessons that you learn. And I'm excited to talk about that. But before we get more into that, I want to talk about more in your profession. Parents today, they're anxious about doing everything right. And again, that kind of goes back to the social media part of we're getting so much information, good and bad. But from your perspective, what matters far more than perfect parenting? It might even relate to team sports, kind of.
Well, I'll start out with a two-word baseball metaphor, and then I'll give you the longer answer. The two-word baseball metaphor is bleacher blisters. And what I mean by that is the most important thing I think about parenting, and I've thought a lot about parenting, is being there. And
Hmm.
it means that your kids' schedules are on your professional calendar. You write down what your kids are doing at 6 p.m. after school if they have a game, but if they have a performance, if they have a club meeting, you know where your kids are. And when you can be there without embarrassing them, you should be there. And so I think that presence is the most important thing that parents can offer their kids.
I
Not
love that.
perfection, not
Yeah.
perfection, presence.
And presence is something that all parents can achieve, which is,
That's right.
a good thing.
That's right.
And after decades of coaching, what do kids actually need from adults in youth sports and what do they get too much of?
They need useful advice as opposed to unuseful advice. So, examples of unuseful advice are a kid comes up to bat and the bases are loaded, and the parents and the coaches are yelling, ducks on the pond, we need one. That's not helpful advice. Or if the pitcher is struggling on the mound, it's not useful advice to say, just throw strikes, just throw strike. He's trying to do that. That's all the useless advice. Useful advice is offering practical suggestions for how to improve what you're doing in a non-judgmental but thoughtful and compassionate way, not yelling at a kid to just swing at strikes because that's not useful.
Yeah, so true. Well, that is great advice. And now we are going to get a little bit more into the book. So, could you guys describe what we will find in this book? What is this book about before we get into some more specific questions?
The book takes 101 events, occurrences, situations in baseball and softball and analogizes those to real life decisions the kids have to make, to school, to friendships, to relationships in their family, to everything off the field. And I alluded to a few of those earlier, but it gives examples from the baseball and softball field of resilience and perseverance and, you know, trying again after you failed, all of which occur every single day, dozens and dozens of times in a single game.
Hmm.
And they also occur in life every single day. And so it's 101 attempts to correlate what happens in baseball and softball with the rest of kids' lives.
Awesome. And so, Ken, you guys introduced the concept of the on deck circle as a place to prepare, observe, and learn from those kind of ahead of you. How can young adults use this idea when they're waiting for their turn in life?
Yeah, I this is one of my favorite chapters, Sam, because it's just there's such a clear analogy. I mean, I flash back. So I'm the older of two siblings. I have a younger brother, so I didn't have the advantage of the sibling, but I did have older cousins, and we were very close. And I think about when I watch them at their bar mitzvahs, watch them go through the college application process and prom, and just the value that held for me, just to see others do that and then try to emulate, or maybe there was something where I said, oh, maybe I'll try this differently. And just like that time in the actual games of baseball and softball, what are you going to do with that time? You have the opportunity to stand on that on deck circle and watch someone else under under the lights, with the pressure on them. How are you going to use that time?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great lesson, and as you're talking, I'm thinking the same. I'm the oldest, and my cousins, they lived around the corner from us, and they were all older, and there was so much that I got from them and following their footsteps and that, I learned from them, and hopefully there's something I taught my younger sister, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll have to ask her. All right, so Harley, from a child development standpoint, how does chronic pressure affect a young person's confidence and nervous system? This could be in sports, but this could also be in real life.
We don't talk enough, Samantha, about burnout in kids. We talk
Mhm.
a lot about burnout in adults. And every adult has experienced shades of burnout, times when they wish they could undo, back up, slow down. But we don't talk about that in kids. Kids have burnout, and they get burnout in sports because their parents or coaches are too forceful, are too insistent, are too unyielding, and they get burnout in life because homework piles up and school pressures pile up and activities, especially as the kids get older into the age range where this book is specifically targeting. The emphasis is on being a renaissance student. You got to do this and belong to this
Mhm.
club, and you've got to join this, and you have to travel here, and you have to be able to write they get kids get burnout. And I think the pressure that we put on kids is excessive, and it leads to something that we just don't talk enough about, and that's childhood burnout.
Yeah. It's so funny that you say this because right before I came on, I was looking, on my Instagram stories, and one of my friends, her and her husband both graduated from Yale, and she has a picture of her daughter and my daughter a couple weeks apart. Her daughter's doing multiplication, tracing these multiple, and I just texted her. She responded. I don't know what she said yet, but I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing multiplication with Willow? Well, I never even thought about this. She could write her letters, but I don't know about multiplication. So I can already see the stress that parents have that they from a parent perspective that they want their child to do better, but that can ultimately cause the burnout, which is stressful again to see where do you stop as a parent. That's also something that's we don't know the answer to, I guess. All right, Ken. So this book is described as wisdom for life disguised as a baseball and softball book. Why do you think sports metaphors reach young people in ways traditional advice often doesn't?
Sam, I think it's as simple as traditional advice can kind of feel like eating your vegetables, right? Whereas
Yeah.
sports themed advice can feel more like dessert.
Right.
Because we were fortunate enough to get David Wright, the legendary New York Mets player, to write the foreword for the book, and
That's
I thought
awesome.
David would be a good fit because he coaches his kids, his two daughters and his son, and he's just a fantastic guy. And it was only after he said, "Yeah, I'll do it," when we huddled to actually write the foreword, I realized just how much he believed he was aligned with our philosophy. He was telling me how his younger daughter, Madison, got a bad grade in school, and the way he talked her out of it was, well, it's just like when you go to the batting cage every day and you get better because you practice, the same thing is going to happen in school, with your math
Mhm.
test. You're just going to keep practicing and you're going to get better. And that connected with his daughter, Madison, so much easier than more traditional advice would have.
Yeah, if you would have just said, "Well, you just need to study more," she might have
Right.
been like, "Well, I am," but
Right.
to have that connection, it's so true. Harley, one of the earliest lessons is keeping score and the idea that the most important things aren't written in a scorebook. How do young people learn to measure their worth beyond grades, stats, and achievements? Because I know I was one that, got the honor roll, you got this. Yeah, I'm a product of my worth was measured by achievement.
The vignette of keeping score in 101 Lessons from the Dugout is the fly ball that's caught in the outfield. And it's scored in the scorebook as a caught fly ball. But what you can't tell from the scorebook is whether it was a diving, heroic catch at the fence or whether it was just a routine pop fly. That's true in life. And the metrics that we use in life, as you mentioned, the grades and stats and achievements, those are important metrics. Should respect those because grades are important. You have to
Mhm.
respect those. But what we have to teach is an equal set of metrics. We have to teach the intangibles. We have to teach good deeds as a metric. We have to teach friendship as a metric. We have to teach charity as a metric. We have to teach kindness as a metric. Those are metrics that should be rewarded, should be acknowledged, should be noticed by parents and coaches and teachers. just as stats and grades and achievements, scholastic achievements and other achievements are noted. So we need to establish a set of intangible metrics that we praise and that we value.
So important. It really is because I feel like for so many kids, if they don't get that A, they think they have failed. But if they are kind and they have good morals and they're volunteering on the weekends, like that
Exactly.
also means something as well.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Ken, so several lessons focus on labels, batting orders, roles and expectations. Why do you think labels are so powerful for young people and how can they learn not to internalize them?
Sam, I think labels can be powerful for old people too. I think
Mhm.
that's a species wide problem. And look, I think it's one way is to ignore those labels, which for sure is easier said than done. Another way is to turn those labels into positives. And I'm reminded of the 2004 Boston Red Sox who wound up calling themselves idiots and made it a positive term just because the way they approached the game was so happy-go-lucky, I guess you would call it. But yeah, it's a tough one. But yeah, there, you mentioned spot in the lineup. Be the best number 9 hitter in the league,
Mhm.
or the best bench player in the league. There's a lot of value to that. So it is certainly a challenge.
Right. Yes, I totally can see that. And yes, as an adult, labels are also a lot of the stuff we're talking about, anyone that's listening, it doesn't go away as you get older. It's just this is directed at the young kids, but plenty of adults can totally relate to all of this. So, Harley, in the starting lineup, you talk about earning your spot and performing like a starter even when you're on the bench. How does that lesson apply to kids who maybe feel overlooked or behind in life right now?
Well, supporting roles in life are very important and oftentimes unacknowledged.
Mhm.
And yet, without the supporting roles, the leading roles would not be successful. So that
Mhm.
we have to acknowledge the fact that kids who aren't starting in any event by
Mhm.
starting it literally aren't the first choice. The winner of the student council election aren't the
Mhm.
ones who are picked to go on the special event that other kids are excluded from. The kids who are not picked are as important as the kids who are picked, but they aren't told that, and
Mhm.
they don't feel that. It's hard, especially when other kids gloat. And the
Right.
gloating of the starters, I think, is one of and that's starters in any field. I think the gloating of the starters is what's the hardest for kids to understand and to deal with. And as parents and as coaches and as teachers, we need to help kids deal with gloat, help kids
Mhm.
deal with the starters' egos and starters' intimidation. And that is unfortunately true. I mean, human nature is that when you got something, you flaunt it. And we
Right.
need to teach we need to teach the kids who don't got something that it's what they're doing is important too.
Yeah. And that's one thing in my teaching world at high school phys ed level, like the kids pick their activities. And so I do a lot of racket sports. I do a lot of tennis and pickleball and badminton. And a lot of the kids who aren't as good at sports come over to me and I make it a point that they don't have to be over there playing basketball or, volleyball at a high level. They're in my gym in the quietness and they're gaining confidence, which is the most important part of it to show that just because you're not good at something doesn't mean
That's
you're
right.
not good at everything.
That's right. My wife tells the story. Samantha, my wife tells the story about when we've gotten better. Society has improved. My wife tells the story about when she was in grade school and middle school that they would give you different color swimsuits. And I remember different color gym shorts, depending
Yeah,
upon how many pull ups you could do, how many push ups you could do. And you would run around, or I would run around in white shorts, and everybody else is in red, blue, and gold. At least we don't do that anymore.
I know. My gosh, like I could not climb up that rope. Remember the rope climb? Like I just have no upper body strength. And I'm like, I'm good at other
That's it.
things, but
White shorts, white shorts.
oh my gosh. Yeah, the times have definitely changed. So, Ken, as someone who has spent a career telling sports stories, what makes this book different to write, knowing it wasn't about, the seasons or the stats, but about shaping young lives?
Yeah, it was a breath of fresh air, Sam. It was the perfect idea for the perfect time in my life because Harley actually came to me, I think Harley, January of 2022, if I remember correctly. And that very next month, I quit my job
Wow.
because I was, Harley mentioned burnout for kids earlier.
Yeah.
I was burned out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was 25 years of hardcore baseball coverage. And it was my childhood dream. I feel so blessed to have achieved it. But I just felt like I didn't need to keep doing it. I proved my point. So I was just so tired of writing about seasons and stats and the nitty gritty of baseball. And frankly, I thought my readership deserved better. They deserved someone who wanted to be doing it. And I deserve better for myself. So for Harley to present this idea and just about the joy of the game itself, the idea that
Mhm.
let's take a moment to smell the roses, and no matter whether your team wins or loses, the game itself is such a joy. I really loved working on it.
Yeah. What a cool thing to have achieved that, lifetime goal, and then you get to write about it in a different way, but still be such a positive thing, and a different, maybe, group of people that are going to be reading it rather than the Sunday morning or the
Right,
day
right,
after the
exactly.
game.
Right.
Harley, in the chapters about chatter and blocking out noise, you draw a clear parallel to gossip, criticism, and distraction. Why is learning to filter noise such a critical life skill today?
There's so much of it. There is just so much noise. And on a baseball field, there are kids, there are teams, and I still watch a lot of Little League baseball. There are teams that still chatter, that still yell, hey, batter, batter, hey, batter, batter. The pitcher's an itcher. There are just teams that do mean things. And there are people on social media who do mean things. They not only gossip, but they bully. And if you can sustain your own self image on a baseball or softball field, then you have to be able to translate that. And we have to help kids translate that to sustaining your own self image in the face of gossip and in the face of bullying and in the face of meanness on social media, especially
Mhm.
where metrics of how many people like you and follow you are seem to be paramount in kids' lives.
They are. It's
but
crazy.
but but they have to not they have we have to teach kids that you have to filter out the noise. That's just chatter.
Mhm.
And I think we ended up cutting this line out from the book. But when someone yells, "Hey, batter, batter," it's like saying, "Hey, I wish I was better." And
Mhm.
and what they really are saying is they are envious, they are jealous, they don't feel good enough about themselves to not have to make other people feel bad.
Yeah, I could totally see that as a What do you think about that, Ken? I see you smiling about it.
Oh, I remember discussing that chapter. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we had a lot of good dialogue on
Yeah.
what to keep, what to cut. But no,
Yeah.
obviously, the chatter is a huge, huge problem. Again, not just for young people, but young people are
Yeah.
more susceptible to it.
And since we're talking, I mean, today we're talking about things that were too heavy for a book. We're talking
Mhm.
about mental health for kids. The three of us are, and so
Mhm.
to tell you that I psychologically I think it means, hey, I wish I was better, is
Right.
something that didn't necessarily have to be written, but in a we're talking about how to help kids among the three of us here and among your
Right.
listeners. I think that's one of the ways.
Yeah, I can totally see that because they're probably not gonna say it to someone who's, like, a below average hitter. They're gonna say it to the better hitters, so and that they wanna be like, which makes a lot of sense. So, Ken, failure shows up again and again in the book: strikeouts, errors, slumps. What do sports teach about failures that school and society often fail to teach as well?
Well, Sam, I think sports teach that failure is inevitable, at least occasional failure. And occasional failure can be acceptable. Chapter 88 of our book is just titled Averages. And then excellent doesn't mean perfect. And we talk about your classic in baseball and softball, your 300 hitter. Even that
Mhm.
3 hits and 10 at bats, that means 7 times you're not getting a hit. And even I'm more analytically inclined, having covered the game so closely. So a 400 on base percentage, that means you're getting on base 4 out of every 10 times. That's still more than half the times where you're failing to do your job.
Right.
Obviously, you when you're in your math class, you're not settling for 40%. You're aiming higher. but maybe one time you get a failing grade, and as long as it averages out to something higher, then it's going to be okay.
Right. Yeah. Failure. You're right. And it is interesting because failure in school is it has such a negative tone to it, but in a sport, it's like, okay, you didn't do great today. Let's work on this specific. I don't know. I feel as though it's more accepted in a lot of ways, and it teaches you a lot more in a positive way than at school sometimes. So, Harley, you emphasize that baseball is a team sport and life is too. From inclusion in the dugout to speaking up for others, what role does empathy play in long term success?
The baseball metaphor that we use for this is pinch hitters and pinch runners. Um, we call upon kids for their different skills. And not every kid, as you said earlier, Samantha, not every kid is a star hitter. Not every kid is a
Hmm.
star pitcher. But every kid can have a role in baseball and softball when they're on the team, but also in real life. When we exclude those kids who have special needs, for example, or who are disabled, or who for some reason are unpopular and not in the clique, they're not among the cool kids. And there are a lot of kids who are not in the cool kids, but the cool kids make them feel miserable.
Hmm.
Empathy is really important. And I'll tell you from my own family, the most rewarding experiences that my kids had were when they befriended kids who didn't have friends. And there was something about, and I was so proud of them for doing it. And it wasn't always easy. I remember my mom telling me that I had to go to a dance with a girl that I was in, I don't know, high school. It was like the girl gets to invite you. And I had to go. I had to go, desperate not to, desperate not to. But why? Why did I have to? Because my mom taught me, we've tried to teach our kids, and Ken and I try to teach our players that the person who is the least popular, the one who is oftentimes excluded, is the one that will make you feel the best when you start to
Hmm.
include them.
Yeah.
I
So
hope she
true.
did. I hope she did. When I accepted, I hope she felt good.
So too.
So it's like a Sadie Hawkins thing, Harley.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that way Sadie Hawkins dance. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask both of you guys this question, but I'll have Ken go first. What's your favorite lesson from the book?
You know what? One of the ones I've really come to enjoy as we're doing these promotions and I'm digging deeper is the fielder's choice, because it's all
Hmm.
about priorities. First and second, one out. What do you do when the ball's hit to you? And it depends in part, what's the score? If you're
Hmm.
if you're only up one, you need to get that out at third base. You need to protect your lead. But if you're up by 4 runs and the easier play is at first, then do that. And in school, if chemistry is just your bête noire, to use a French phrase, your downfall, but you're somehow managing an A- right now. Maybe you don't have to go as hard as the chemistry that day, and you can do your English, which you like a little better. But if your chemistry is a C-, then you need to step on the gas with the chemistry.
Yeah. So true. I love that lesson. How about for you, Harley?
Mine changed. Mine changed in game 2 of the World Series this past year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ken and I have talked about this, but my new favorite chapter is cleaning up the dugout. You clean up your mess today, you don't leave it for tomorrow. And the reason it changed in game 2 of the World Series is because LA Dodgers pitcher Yoshi Yamamoto, who had just thrown a complete game in game 2 of the World Series, was filmed by one lucky reporter who happened to see him picking up the paper cups and the trash in the dugout as the rest of his team was gone. They all went to the dugout, to the wherever they
Clubhouse,
go to take
clubhouse.
showers.
Yeah.
Yeah, clubhouse. Good word. See, that's why I told you the ultimate insight. They went to the clubhouse. Yoshi Yamamoto is cleaning up the dugout, and the lesson in the book, which is chapter 92, the lesson in the book is you don't leave today's mess for tomorrow. And that applies
Hmm.
to your desk at home, but it also applies to your problems at home. You clean up today's problems so they're not problems tomorrow. And Yoshi Yamamoto is the role model for that. And I hope he's listening to your podcast because
I
he
hope he is too. We're going to have to send it to him.
send it to him.
That is I love that as well, and, I need to listen more to that as I still need to clean all of the, kids' toys up there before I go to bed. So Harley, when parents read this book, what do you hope it gives them kind of permission to let go of?
Your kids are not going to be Major League Baseball players. Your kids may not even get a scholarship to college by playing baseball. Your kids may not make the all-star team. Going from Major League Baseball all the way down to Little League, your kids may not do it. You should not, as parents, live your life vicariously through your kids' achievements on the baseball or softball field and make them so pressured and so burdened by your own goals that
Mhm.
you need to let go of. You need to let go of the fantasy that your kid's going to be the baseball player. And then you and your kids will enjoy the game much more. You go out there and you play your heart out, but you're not going to play Major League Baseball, and it shouldn't come home to your dinner table where you're still miserable and blaming your kid for the pop fly that he dropped.
So true. And I hope a lot of parents listening can take that information and suggestions from you, because I think a lot of people do kind of forget that it's youth sports. It's not the major leagues, and maybe they'll make it there one day, but probably not. So let's just let them be kids, which is the most important thing. So Ken, last question of the evening. If you could speak directly to a young adult who feels behind or unsure of themselves, what would you want them to hear?
Well, I do a lot of that, Sam. Just in my walks of it, we're counting college students as young adults, and
Mhm.
it's the old Saturday Night Live, Stuart Smalley, Al Franken. Like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. It was a laugh
Mhm.
line, but there's so much truth to that, right? Like people need pep talks, and
Mhm.
I think as adults, we have the gravitas, the seriousness to convey that to these young people and to let them know that they are loved, that they are appreciated, and that they can make it and they have the tools to make it because there's so much negativity in this world, especially for young people, so much judgment and rush to judgment
Mhm.
because of social media in part. I just think that's the kind of infusion they need.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I think that is a great place to end it. So that's going to bring us to the end of another episode of The Running Wine Mom. Ken, Dr. Rotbart, thank you guys so much for this conversation. The way you woven sports, parenting, and real life together is really so incredibly powerful. And I know this will land deeply with the young adults, parents, and coaches all alike. So I'm very grateful for the work that you guys are putting into the world and for sharing your time and your insight with us. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to meet you.
Yes, you as well. So, thank you so much to the listeners for spending time with us today on The Running Wine Mom. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. You can follow me on Instagram at The Running Wine Mom _ and Ken and Harley. Where can the listeners find you?
Ken?
Harley?
So if you go to harleyrotbart.com or noregretsparenting.com, there's a website there. But we'd really love for you to go to amazon.com and look for 101 Lessons from the Dugout, because it's unlikely that your kids are going to buy it, even though we wrote it in a language for your kids. But we think you'll like reading it just as much as your kids will. Amazon.com, 101 Lessons from the Dugout.
For
I
sure.
will link
I'm
that.
also I'm on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And nowadays I'm mostly promoting this book. So there you go.
Awesome. What's your handle on?
Just at Ken Davidoff.
Okay, perfect. And
I'm
I will
OG.
link. You're the OG. Yeah, I love it. I will link all of that for you guys. And congratulations again. Your book comes out on February 5th, and this episode will air right after it. So I am excited for it to launch and for all of your success. So thanks, guys, so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Sam.
so much.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me today. Remember, you are strong, you are capable, and you are all amazing. Until next time, keep running, keep sipping, keep playing a little baseball, and embracing the joy of life. Cheers, and I will be back next Tuesday.